Come on, Substance Church, make some noise if you're in the house this morning. So good to be with you all. I want to welcome in our Facebook Live family, our downtown campus. Y'all are sweating it out in downtown today. I know it. We're praying for you. Hey, air conditioning is on the way, okay? It's coming soon. Come on, somebody. Hey, if we haven't met, my name is Shepp. I serve as the downtown campus pastor, also serve as one of the teaching pastors, and just so honored to be with you this weekend at Substance Church. On behalf of our lead pastors, Peter and Carolyn Haas, man, we've prayed for you. We've prepared for you. It's for a reason that you're in church this weekend, listening online, watching this later. We're so glad that you're joining us today. It's the last Sunday in June. What happened? It's going so fast. It's hot out there. It's muggy today. Summer at Substance is in full swing. I love summer at Substance Church. We got connect groups and water sports and barbecues, and we got Serve Day coming up in 2 weeks. Man, let me just say something about Serve Day real quick. I love Serve Day. I mean, Dino Rizzo, kind of the executive director of the ARC, our church planning network, says it this way. He says, service has a way of bypassing people's minds and going directly to their hearts. And we want to serve the heart of our cities here in Spring Lake Park, in downtown Minneapolis. So let me just encourage you, if you're wondering whether or not you should sign up, you should, okay? substancechurch.com/serveday. Amazing projects. I think we had over 400 people last year. Let's double that this year, Substance. Come on, show up on Serve Day. Let's go, okay? So that's what I'll say about that. But another reason I love summer is every single summer my family takes some sort of family vacation, okay? This last month, we actually took a road trip. We upped the ante this summer and drove out to northwest Montana, out to Kalispell. It was awesome, okay? We did the Black Hills, we did Mount Rushmore, we did Glacier, we did Big Mountain. We also did 40 hours in the van. Guys, that's an entire work week with the six of us in my 2008 Honda Odyssey. It was awesome. It was terrible. Everything in between. It was great. But speaking of the six of us, I want to quick show you a picture of my family. Never want to miss an excuse to show you my family. This is my tribe, my people. Real quick, yeah. Little girl up there that I'm holding, that's Thalie. She just turned 3. She's amazing. She's a destroyer of all things. It's crazy. Our house is a mess. It's awesome. Then our little girl Nora there just turned 6. Eden just turned 9. Our big guy Judah turns 11 in 2 days. So we're having a great time as a family. Man, I love being a dad. And every single summer, my summer starts off with my wedding anniversary. So this year, Erica and I celebrated 12 years of marriage, which is awesome. Yeah, thank you. She'd be really clapping for her. She's put up with me for 12 years. That is a feat in and of itself. Let me tell you something about that. She's in the front row saying amen right now. But so much fun. And every single year around my anniversary, I tend to get a little nostalgic, right? Like I'm not a super nostalgic guy. I kind of live my life fast forward, pedal to the metal. Let's go, let's move, let's do things. But every year on my anniversary, I start kind of reflecting a little bit on, man, what has God done in our lives and what has God done in our kids? And as I was thinking this last time around, I was thinking about my kids when they were like really little. Some of you are in this season right now, really little kids. I was remembering this season about my son, Judah, when he was about 6 or 7 years old. And if your kids are anything like mine, sometimes they have a hard time listening. Anybody can get amen from me on that, listening? Not your kids, right? Your kids wake up and they jump right into the devotions and prayer, and they cook you breakfast before you wake up, and they just do trust falls in each other's arms before you even wake up. Your kids are amazing. Not my kids. My kids are awesome. But my goodness, sometimes, right? They just don't listen. So when my son Judah was probably about 6 or 7 years old, okay, we were going to go somewhere. We were at our house, and in typical 6, 7-year-old boy fashion, his shirt was a mess. I mean, it was destroyed, right? Mud and probably some blood on there too. It was ripped up. I'm like, hey, buddy, could you come inside? We need to leave. I need you to change your shirt. Okay, Dad. I come back inside, get ready to go for about 10 minutes, look out the back window. He's literally rolling around in the dirt in the backyard. I'm like, dude, come inside. We have to go. I will leave you here. I'll use an empty threat if I need to, okay? I'm not afraid to use an empty threat with my kids, okay? So, dude, come inside. Like, we got to go. We need to go now. Okay, Dad. Runs inside, runs downstairs. 5 minutes later, I'm like, where is this guy? I walk downstairs, sitting on his bed, reading a book, same shirt, right? Now, as pumped as I am that he's reading a book, I'm like, dude, we have to go, okay? So I'm like losing it just a little bit. I know, again, none of you parents ever lose it with your kids. You're calm and peaceful all the time. That's just not my style, okay? I'm like, dude, I will leave you here. If you're not upstairs in 60 seconds with a new shirt on, we will leave. So I walk back up the stairs, set my timer on my watch. I hear the footsteps up the stairs. I'm like, finally, my exceptional parenting is paid off. He's coming with a brand new shirt, walks up the stairs, around the corner. Oh, hey, Dad, different shorts, no shirt. I'm like, it's not that hard. Just change your shirt, right? Just, know what I'm talking about? Any parents in the room right now know exactly what I'm talking about? It's hard sometimes, right? By the way, if you're ever wondering why parents of small children are always late, this is why, okay? There is no logic, there is no reason with these little people. They hold us hostage before we leave our homes. Just feel free to add about 10 to 15 minutes per kid of lateness. Set your expectations correctly, and you will not be disappointed. Okay, just change your shirt. All you have to do. Now, it's a silly example, okay, but I'm not so sure that our adult lives are that much different. Come on, somebody, right? Especially when it comes to life with God, right? We make it complicated. Don't get me wrong. It's simple when we start, isn't it? Like the simplest of truths, Jesus Christ came into this world to save us, to redeem us, to restore us, to transform us, to give us this John 10:10 life to the full. Right? And we sit in church and we hear God has a plan for your life. He has a purpose for your life. He wants you to follow Him. He's got amazing things. He's got a call on your life, and it's true. And you're like, sign me up. I want to get me some of that. It starts off so simple, but if we're honest, doesn't it get complicated pretty quick after that? Like pretty soon after that, it gets complicated. It seems like everything in your life is working against God's will for your life. It gets frustrating. It seems like nothing is working. Everything around you feels like it's working against you. How many of you know it's easy to start something? It's a whole lot harder to maintain and ultimately finish something, right? It's easy to start something. Maybe you're at church this weekend or listening online, and you actually aren't sure how you feel about this whole God, like this whole idea of Jesus and church. You're just like, man, I thought I was coming to a club. I'm not sure what this place is. Hey, it's cool. We're glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. Here's what you need to know this weekend is this. It's only this. God sees you. He loves you. He has a plan for your life. He just wants you to follow Him. He's with you, okay? But listen to me. No matter where you find yourself this weekend in church, there is a way forward. Right? Don't complicate it. Don't get it twisted. The path to fullness of life and to all the plans and purposes that God has for you, it's actually simple. But notice what I didn't say. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. God is not playing hide and seek with your future, right? He's not holding out on you. He actually wants a simple way forward for every single one of us. The clear path forward, however, is often one that we don't actually want, right? It's actually one we don't actually want many times. I believe God brought many of you to church this weekend to move you forward in small, simple steps of faith. Let me show you what I mean. We're actually going to take a look this weekend at one of my favorite characters from the Bible, a man named Jonah. It's kind of a classic story. Maybe you grew up in the church hearing about Jonah and the big fish, Jonah and the whale. Here's what you need to know. Jonah has got himself a listening problem. He does. Look it out. Check it out. Jonah verse 1. It says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. God says, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. So God is saying, Jonah, I'm sending you on a mission. This is the call that I have on you right now. Go to Nineveh and preach the gospel. Preach that God sees you, that He loves you, that He's with you, that you got to follow Him, okay? Stop following all these worthless, worldly things and follow Him, okay? Verse 3, but Jonah ran away from the Lord, and he headed to Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, literally he's paying money to run from God. Think about that. The intentionality behind that. He went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. So within the first 3 verses of this book, right, Jonah hears from God and he's like, nah, bro, I'm out. Like, I don't want any part of that. I'm going to sit this one out. So instead of traveling 500 miles, right, to Nineveh to fulfill God's call on his life, he actually pays money to go 2,500 miles in the opposite direction and run from God's call on his life. Now, can I be honest with you? I'm encouraged by this. Okay, can I just say that? Like, I'm actually encouraged by this. Think about this just for a moment. Jonah is literally a prophet, right? The one person in his generation that God has chosen to speak directly to. Now, in the New Testament, we're believers. God speaks to every single one of us individually, specifically, uniquely. It's awesome. But here in this Old Testament setting, God is speaking to individual people and giving them messages for everybody else. So Jonah, the one guy who should know better, right, turns and runs. He runs away from the call of God on his life. Right? If there was anybody on the planet that should have said a resounding yes to God, it's this guy. But he says no. Right? Look what happens when he gets on the ship, right? He jumps on the ship. The Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break apart. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the load. So there's this big storm that comes up, right? And the sailors are taking the cargo. Maybe if we lighten the load, maybe we just change some things up, this ship will be saved. We're going to come back to this. Keep this in mind, okay? Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." So somehow in their reasoning, they're understanding, man, this is an act of God. Something is happening here beyond just a storm. Somebody is responsible for this. So they cast lots, and the lots fell to Jonah. Right, so put yourself here for a minute. Anybody ever been on a ship before? I have not been on a ship. You will not get me on a ship. I like my concrete under my feet. I'm happy with that. I can't imagine being on a ship, having that thing rock back and forth, things flying over. No thanks. Okay, absolutely not. But here they are on this ship, rocking back and forth, threatening to break apart the ship. Right? Here's what they're doing. They're throwing cargo overboard. Maybe if we get rid of some cargo, change some things up, it'll save us. But here's what they didn't know. And if you hear me say nothing else this weekend in church, hear this. It wasn't a cargo problem. It was a calling problem. It wasn't a cargo problem at all. It was a calling problem. The problem wasn't the number of boxes on the ship or how heavy they are or what they contained, right? The problem was the man on the boat running from the call of God on his life. That was the problem. I think for us, time and time again, when our lives don't seem to be working out, we often try to deal with the cargo in our lives before dealing with the calling that's on our lives. Let me flesh that out for you, okay? The cargo of our lives is all these things out here. We focus on all the external factors, all the reasons that we aren't experiencing the fullness that God has for us. So we swap out our spouses, or we move to a different city, or we change our job, or we find a different church, assuming that these things will ultimately get us somehow closer to the life God has planned for us, right? Time and time again. And we're hardwired for it. We're constantly looking for the new opportunity, for the fresh, the exciting offer. We're hardwired for it, and we live in a world that bombards us with marketing specifically around this. Bigger, newer, flashier, sexier, more exciting. I want to feel the adrenaline. I want to feel the goosebumps, or it just doesn't do it for me, right? And what happens is, church, we take this mentality and we apply it to the call of God on our lives. And we create a very specific narrative storyline in our heads of how this thing should look, and usually it's full of idealism, isn't it? Right? My life should look like fill in the blank. And don't get me wrong, I think that Christians, followers of God, more than anybody on the earth should dream big dreams, right? Huge dreams. Let's imagine what God could do. I love Ephesians 3:20. We should expect God to do exceedingly and abundantly more than all we could hope or imagine. Yes, absolutely. At the same time, there's a lie out there, okay? Maybe you've heard it before. Just find something you're passionate about, and you will not work a day in your life. That's a lie. It is, right? Just find something that you're created to do, and everything will just kind of click, and it'll be easy, it'll be awesome. Rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. Just do what you were created to do. Life will just click. It's a lie. Listen to me, it's not true. Anything worth doing will be hard, and it should be. Your marriage, it's hard, it should be. Your job, it's hard, it should be. Your parenting, it's hard, it should be. Ask anybody who's built anything that stands the test of time, it's hard. It takes perseverance, it takes faithfulness and grit and determination. Stop waiting to feel passionate about something, and let's live our lives on mission. Come on, somebody. Stop waiting for the feeling to come. Get your feelings behind your actions. Get your actions out front of your feelings. Let's live life on mission. You see, I just believe that so many people miss God's true call on their lives because it isn't flashy, it isn't sexy, it's actually dressed in overalls and looks a lot like hard work, right? Life with God is simple, it's not easy. More often than not, God's path for you will consist of something you don't actually want to do. And in those moments, you can't feel your way into obedience. Get your actions out front. It's going to be hard. It's supposed to be hard, but listen, the favor of God will follow you. It will. Now, this was Noah's problem, okay? Where he wanted to follow God's call on his own terms. So the minute God asked him to do anything that was outside of his preference, he was out, right? We actually find out at the end of the story why Jonah ran. Look at what it says in verses 1 through 2 of Jonah 4. But it says, but to Jonah, this seemed very wrong, right? So what's happened is Jonah has gone, he's preached to the Ninevites. God has come down, he's saved the entire nation. People have responded. They're giving their lives to God. It's amazing. Jonah says this, he says, this is what I tried to avoid, right? I knew that you were a gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love, a God who relents in sending calamity. Think about this. Jonah actually didn't want God to save them, so he went somewhere else. That'll preach. That's a whole different message right there, right? But that's what Jonah was saying. He said, I wanted to do this on my own terms. I wanted the assignment that made me feel good. I wanted the calling and the road to my calling that he understood and made me a star and made me awesome. Not this one. I didn't want that one. More often than not, following God means digging in and resisting the temptation to hit the eject button. We don't like pain. We don't like difficulty. We really don't like doing things that we don't want to do we? Right? Let me tie this down a bit with a story from my life, this is how God has done this in me. When Erica and I first got married 12 years ago, man, I was obsessed with the idea of being quote-unquote in ministry, okay? While I was in college, my roommate and I started a Bible study. It had some success. We had 50 people showing up at our little St. Paul apartment every single week. I started a ministry with my future father-in-law out of his home. A young adult community. We had hundreds of young adults showing up every single week. Clearly, there was something on my life around leadership and communication. I'll be honest, I really, really loved me. I love the idea of being able to be on a stage and communicate and lead and influence people, so I chased it. I really loved it. I was convinced that God had called me to it. So after college, I was working for an amazing nonprofit here in the Twin Cities that was ministering to at-risk youth, which is a fancy way to say I had no money or health insurance. On the side, I was part of starting a discipleship school. I got to teach. I got to lead worship. I thought I was amazing. It was awesome, right? I had a purple mohawk and a lip ring, and I was going for it, okay? Now, if you're in church this weekend, if you have a purple mohawk and a lip ring, that's awesome. You do you. I was just trying really, really hard, okay? That's all you need to know about that. But there was nothing that was going to hold me back. I was chasing full throttle God's call on my life. Eric and I had just gotten married, and we lived in a free bank-owned home in North Minneapolis. So this bank offered us this crazy program. Hey, live for free in this house, clean it, keep it up, and while it's on the market, we're trying to sell it. So we just lived for free. I'm not even sure it was legal, but we did it, right? It was awesome. I was doing everything I could to chase the dreams and calling that God had placed in my heart. The only problem is I was creating a house of cards, right? I was creating something that looked amazing from the outside, but it lacked the structural integrity of humility and character and life experience, where the slightest breeze would blow that thing right over. Well, one day the hurricane came, right? The bank called and said, hey, we're going to shut down this program. You got to be out of the house. I was like, oh, no. That same month, the school I had been a part of starting folded. So all of a sudden, my ministry outlets were gone, right? With really no place to go, no income, no health insurance. My wife and I moved back into the basement of my old college roommate, right? And while I'd been busy chasing my ministry dreams, there was a very real tension developing in my own home, okay? My wife wasn't sure if she could trust me to take care of her, but much less a family we wanted to start. And here's the deal. She wasn't wrong. We were making no money, no insurance. I was never home. Our housing just fell through. And now we live in my college roommate's basement. 1 year into marriage, not only had I not taken us forward, I had taken us backwards, right? So how do we get there? I had gotten there, friends, by chasing my dream on my terms. I was so obsessed with my calling to ministry, I neglected the most important calling in my life, my marriage. It was easy to be a hero on the stage. Here's the deal. It was much harder and messier to deal with all my flaws and all my insecurities and all my faults and all my personality quirks that were causing division in my own home. I was chasing it on my terms. To be honest, I still deal with this tension today. God has done a lot in my life, and I'm so thankful for it. But man, it is so much easier to stand on a stage and deliver carefully crafted words and seem like the hero than it is to go home and dig into my kids' hearts. Than to go home exhausted and serve my wife every single day. Than to go home, right, and take care of our family finances. And to go home and steward the blessing and gift that God has given me in my own home. Which one do you think God cares more about? I'm telling you, if I don't have integrity in my own home, nothing up here matters. It doesn't. So there I was at my lowest point of my life, a year into my marriage, much like Jonah was in this moment. Let's pick it back up. Jonah chapter 1, verse 12 now. Right, so they know it's this guy's fault. He's why. Right? Jonah says, verse 12, pick me up and throw me into the sea, he says, and it will become calm. I know it's my fault that this great storm has come upon you. He doesn't run from it. He assumes responsibility for it, okay? So they pick up Jonah, toss him over, and in that moment, the seas die down. This is so cool, right? And the sailors, man, they are shook. They're like, what just happened? And look what it says, right? I'm not going to have it on the screen, but it says, they started offering sacrifices to the Lord and made vows to him. Just a paragraph earlier, they were praying all to their own gods, calm the storm, and now they're making vows to the one true God. Even in your running, God will use you. Isn't that awesome? Even in your running, God will use you. That's incredible. Now the story gets really weird, okay? As if it wasn't weird already. A huge fish shows up, swallows Jonah whole. Awesome, right? So that's a bad day. I mean, that's a bad day, right? You're the prophet of God, you run from God, you're thrown overboard voluntarily, a fish swallows you. That's a tough day, okay? 3 days, 3 nights, Jonah is chilling in the belly of this fish. I mean, talk about a low moment. And in that moment, Jonah has basically 2 choices. Pack it in. I'm done. This is too hard. God, where are you? Why do bad things happen to good people? Like, what's going on here, God? But he chooses the second option, right? Jonah 2, verse 1, from inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. In his lowest of moments, Jonah turns to God. This is so important. He doesn't wallow in self-pity. He doesn't cash it in, doesn't play the victim, right? He cries out to God, and God responds. And here's what this tells me. No matter how far you've run from God, it's always one step back. You are not as far from God as you feel like you are. You're not. Turn around. He's literally right there. Cry out to him. Wherever you're at this weekend, cry, God, I'm sorry. I want to come back. He's like, okay, come on back. And look what happens, right? This fish like, puh. I love that sound. Puh. Spits Jonah out, right, back onto the sea, or back onto the beach, right? And then God speaks again, right? Jonah 3, verses 1 and 2. And the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. What does he say? Go to the great city of Nineveh. Proclaim the message I gave you. Do the thing I already told you to do. If Jonah was looking for a new assignment, this was not it. Do the thing I always wanted you to do. Come back to that. Finally, Jonah relents and listens. So there I was in my college roommate's basement with my wife. I mean, like, God, what happened and where are you? It's kind of this kind of whimper session, me-centered prayer, right? And you better believe, did God respond? Oh, yeah, he did. I've said it before. 90% of the time when God speaks to me, it sounds a lot like Erica Shepp, right, my wife. The other 10% usually sounds a lot like Linda Shepp, Mama Shepp, okay? Men, listen to the women in your life. They're way smarter than we are. I'm just going to leave that at that, okay? But listen to the women in your life, okay? So Mama Shepp, right? How many of you got a praying mama at home, a spirit-filled praying mama? Don't mess with them, okay? Please don't mess with them. But so my wife and I, Erica, we went home for a wedding to my hometown, and my mom took one look at my purple mohawked, lip ring pierced, right? She took one look at me and was like, nuh-uh. It's like the Spirit of God came over her. She took me out behind the woodshed, right? The verbal woodshed, and gave me a talking to, right? How embarrassing is that? 22 years old, a year into marriage, and my mom is like, come here, son, right? That's not a good thing. Here's what she said, okay? She might never remember this, but here's what she said. She said, look, buddy, God has given you an incredible wife. If you keep messing around, you're going to lose her. You want to have kids? You don't have insurance. Get yourself together. Not going to lie, that stung a little bit. Okay, like that hurt. It wasn't what I wanted to hear. It's what I needed to hear. I needed that. And I wonder if you have people in your life that will tell you what you need to hear. If they will look you in the eye and hold you accountable to the blessing God has already put in your life, right? That's the honest question. Do you have people in your life? Because listen to me, here's the deal. Don't chase your future at the expense of your present. Don't chase the call of God on your life at the expense of the blessing He's already given you to steward. Because it's in that stewardship, it's in that blessing you currently have that God will lead you to your calling. Don't chase your future at the expense of your present. So that night, I cut my hair, took the lip ring out. I started applying for jobs. It was literally the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to preach. I wanted to lead. Instead, got a job at Caribou, right? They gave me an actual paycheck and health insurance, right? I learned what it meant to work 60 hours a week and make money that I was too tired to spend anyway. Right? I learned what it was. I learned how to manage people and personalities and emotions. I learned that maybe I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And most importantly, I learned how to be addicted to coffee. Right? It's a big deal. God did it. I'm telling you, I have never felt further from my calling than when I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get chewed out by a little old lady because I put 3 Splendas instead of 2 in her latte. Right? I never felt further from the purposes of God in my life than cleaning up a stranger's puke in that bathroom. I never did. But God knew something that I needed to learn, right? Because in that Caribou in Roseville, Minnesota, store 126, God grew me up. He did. He grew me up. It's where God began the foundation of humility, of patience, of loving difficult people, of managing personalities. He showed me how to look past people's attitudes and anger and enter into their story, into their pain. God taught me more about ministry in that year, that season of my life, than maybe any year since. It was amazing. And it didn't happen in a moment. It happened in a million small moments all added together. A million small moments of faithful obedience and failure all added together. And God is still doing it today. Every single day, He's still doing it. I wanted to fast track my calling. I mean, that's the world we live in, isn't it? I mean, everything is instant. I want to be able to buy something from Amazon and get it a couple hours later, and I want to do one click to do it. Right? Don't make me click twice. One click buy, get that thing to my door today. Right? That's what we want. We want the microwaved, consolidated version of success, but God is all about the slow, steady, dirt path of discipleship. It's the slow, steady path. You better believe those 40 hours that we spent in that minivan this month, some were awesome, some were awful. If I could have snapped my fingers and teleported us to Kalispell, Montana, I would have done it in a heartbeat. You better believe it. But man, God did something in those 40 hours in our family. It was awesome. Like we worked through some difficulty, and my wife and I had some amazing conversations. My kids have a memory they'll remember forever, 40 hours in that van. It was awesome, and it was hard. I mean, there were moments where I wanted to give up, like when we pulled into Bozeman, Montana, and Chipotle was closed. That was awful, right? There were some hard moments on this trip, okay? But we persevered by the grace of God, okay? As stressful as it was, God did something in our family, right? In the mundane, the small, the faithful details of life, God is building something better than a platform, than a dream, than a calling. He's building you. He's building your character. He wants to make sure the structural integrity of our hearts, of our minds, are able to withstand the call He wants to lay on us. But it starts with stewardship now, not later. So ask yourself today, this weekend, what areas of my life am I currently neglecting at the expense of following my future, right? Where am I currently compromising to chase my destiny, right? Is it my parenting? Is it my marriage? Is it my finances? Maybe it's my own personal holiness and life before God. Every small thing you do matters big time to God. And the best news of all is that none of the failures, none of the success, none of it causes God to love you more or less than He already does. None of it. That's the gospel. We don't work for approval. We don't work for love. We work from approval and love. We don't obey so that God will see us and notice us and love us. We obey because He's already loved me completely. He's already seen my whole heart all the way through. I love that song. You've loved my whole heart, every nook and cranny, every dark place, every crevice, every broken part of me. He's already loved. You have nothing to prove. Just walk with Him, minute by minute, day by day. To bring this home, I want to share a story that I read recently about a man named Koda, okay? Koda is an architect who actually lives in Japan. So Koda was famous for building some of the finest houses in all of Tokyo, okay? This dude was a builder, a custom builder. These houses are like world famous for architecture and quality, just amazing homes. Actually, his work became world famous because of his dedication to his craft. He was relentlessly devoted to learning and improving his entire life, but eventually, like we all do, Koda grew weary. Right? He's like, I'm going to retire. I'm going to spend more time with my grandkids. I'm going to travel. It's going to be awesome. So he goes to his supervisor and says, hey, here's my 2-week notice. I'm going to retire. But his boss says this. His boss says, Koda, we are forever indebted to the magnificent work that you've done for us. Thank you so much. We just have one more favor to ask. Will you build one more house for us? It's for a very important client. In fact, it may be the most important house that you ever build in your life. The entire company agrees Koda has to build this house. It has to have your personal touch. Now, Koda was understandably frustrated. He would have loved to start traveling. He had to actually have to cancel some trips, right, to do this project. So he went home, talked to his wife, and he said, okay, I guess I'll build the house. Reluctantly agreed to build the house, right? So as they were building it, the trouble was his heart was no longer in it. He was mentally and emotionally checked out of the process. He was over it. He was more than ready to move on to the next phase of his life. Instead, he was convinced the next phase is much more appealing than the phase I'm currently in, okay? So he was over it. So he delegated work, and the building will be up to code, certainly, but it didn't have the quality and the craftsmanship and the attention to detail that every one of his other homes had had. He was over it. After 4 months, the house was finally done, okay? He goes back to his boss and said, hey, I'm done, I'm out, this is it. His boss says, just one more thing, just one more thing. Koda's like, oh, he's exasperated. They're going to sucker me into building another house. I just know it. His boss reaches into his desk, takes out a black box with a red ribbon and sets it on the desk. Koda opens it up, and his boss says, hey, we just love you so much. We think you're the best. This is our gift to you. And it was a key to the house he had just built. The very house he had just built, and his heart sank. If only he knew, listen to this, if only he knew he was building his own house the entire time, he would have done it so much differently. And here's what I'm here to say to you this weekend. God is calling all of us this weekend to faithfulness. Not necessarily to success, right? Or huge and big things. That's maybe down the road, but right now He's calling us to faithfulness. He's calling us to the things that no one else may ever see, because in that faithfulness, in that normal, unseen, mundane thing, you're building something. Brick by faithful brick. Right? Every time you choose to wake up early and open the Word of God and pray and connect with your Father and worship, you're building something. Every time you choose to close your laptop, to put down your phone, and not go to the places that you know you shouldn't be, you're building something. Every time in your workplace you choose to honor your boss and pray for her instead of participating in the gossip around the office, you're building something. Every time you come home from work exhausted and spent and you get on that floor and play with your kids, you're building something. Every time you show up at church on Sunday morning, park those cars, serve that coffee, greet people at those doors, you are building something. You're building something. God is building you. You're building the foundation, the structural integrity that you will stand on for the rest of your life. Don't cut corners. Don't give up. Don't try to artificially fast forward anything. Commit yourself to the process. So here's the question for us this weekend. Where in my life do I need to recommit myself, reinvest myself? Is it my marriage, right? I mean, what's your next step? Hey, are you married? That's your next step. Become the best spouse you can possibly be. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about you. Do you have kids? Man, invest in your kids today and tomorrow and the next day. You're not going to feel like it, but but it's the right way forward. Maybe it's your finances, your vocation, wherever it is, where can you reinvest yourself today, faithful step by faithful step, and watch God show up? Let's pray. God, we thank you that you're with us. Thank you that you've given us the lives you've given us, God. We're so sorry for forsaking the things you've given us and chasing the things that we think you're calling us to. God, would you convict us and give us the grace we need to reinvest ourselves in the lives you've currently given us. Help us not to forsake our present for our future. So God, in this moment, we just surrender everything we have to you. And church, if you're in that place this weekend where you just want to kind of rededicate your life, recommit yourself to following God in his path for you, let's pray this after me. Say, Dear Jesus, thank you for creating me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for saving me. I surrender my life and everything in it to you. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said amen. Amen. Substance, love you. Hey, next week, Pastor Peter is back in the pulpit with a brand new teaching series for the summer, so make sure you come back next week with that. I love you guys. I'm going to invite our campus pastor to come on up and tell us where we're going next.